Want to watch a story? It's a good one. When Netflix arrived 25 years ago, the net looked a lot like this. And the flicks looked a lot like that. And then, hey, Netflix shows up.
Go to Netflix.com. Make a list of the movies you want to see. It's easy.
Suddenly, millions of DVDs are flying through the mail. I never returned this one. That's on me. But at a certain point, DVDs just couldn't keep up. Luckily, by that time, the internet could.
The history of Netflix is one of the most fascinating stories, but things were nearly very different. At one point, Netflix was a small DVD rental service on the verge of going out of business, and they were desperately trying to sell their company to their biggest competitor, Blockbuster. However, Blockbuster turned their offer down and laughed them out of the room.
Now, in 2000, Netflix was very different than the company you might know today. We were very small. We were about 2.5 years old. We had less than 100 employees, and we were on track to perhaps do $3 million that year. But unfortunately, we were also on track to lose a cumulative $50 million. And being prudent entrepreneurs, we decided at that point it was time to seek strategic alternatives. And the obvious strategic alternative was Blockbuster. But in 2000, they were on a very different trajectory. So we were on track to do $3 million. Blockbuster was on track to do $6 billion. We had 100 employees. They had 60,000 employees. They had 9,000 stores. And so when we tried to call them up to get a meeting, they wouldn't even take our calls. They wouldn't answer our emails until finally, after a bunch of pounding on the door, they said that we will see you now. And we flew to Dallas. We went up to the 27th floor of this building. We were ushered into a conference room which seemed to be about the size of this room. All the Blockbuster guys came in their very expensive suits, and we were there in our Silicon Valley t-shirts and jeans. And we all sat down to pitch. And we said, it's great, we will do the online business, you'll do the stores, we'll have synergy, won't that be great? And they shook their heads in the right place. And then they asked the big question, how much should we pay for you? And my partner, Reed, screwed up his courage and he said, $50 million? And that's exactly the reaction that they had.
Fast forward a couple of decades, and Blockbuster have long since gone bankrupt, whilst Netflix went on to be worth over $200 billion, won countless prestigious awards, and completely revolutionized entertainment.
Blockbuster at its peak wasn't just a video store, it was the video store. At its height, Blockbuster had more locations than most countries in the world had movie theaters. And with more than 80,000 employees and an annual revenue of nearly $6 billion, it was a titan of the entertainment industry. So, how exactly did Blockbuster experience such a meteoric rise, and what drove this behemoth of a company to go from over 9,000 stores in 2004 to just one today?
So how did they do it? And, most importantly, why is Netflix now in a very deep trouble? Marc Randolph was sure of one thing. He wanted to start his own internet business. He'd seen the huge success Amazon was having selling books online and felt there was a huge opportunity with this new internet thing. The only problem was that he had no clue what business to start. For months, everywhere Marc went, he carried around a little notebook to write ideas in, and he'd then pitch them to his friend Reed. How about we sell personalized surfboards, dog food, baseball bats? Marc had endless ideas of things they could sell, but Reed always just shook his head and said that'll never work. After Marc had gone through more than 100 ideas, Reed said they should instead try to find something that people will pay for repeatedly, so once you've found a customer, you'll be able to sell to them over and over again. Reed also said they should stay away from customizable items, because then every new order requires additional work, so it's not as scalable. Marc considered this, and then threw out one final suggestion. How about videotapes? For the first time, Reed didn't immediately dismiss the idea. Instead, he looked out the window, seemingly deep in thought, and eventually said, maybe. Now here's the thing. Right before Marc had mentioned videotapes, Reed had just been fined a $40 late fee by Blockbuster for returning a movie late. Reed thought to himself that perhaps movie rentals was the industry in need of a change. Perhaps this could be their big business idea. Renting out movies via the internet. It's perfect, right? Wrong. As soon as Marc and Reed thought about the idea some more, reality started to sink in. Remember, this was 1997, where people were using VHS tapes, which were very bulky to ship, and this had pretty high postage costs, So they'd be at a huge disadvantage compared to physical video rental stores who didn't have to pay postage, not to mention the high risk of the tapes getting damaged in the mail. It started to become clear to both Marc and Reed that business idea was dead before it had even begun. At least it was until a few weeks later, when Reed was reading an article in a tech magazine about a new technology called DVDs, which would solve most of the issues that VHS tapes had. DVDs were much smaller and lighter, meaning they were easier and cheaper to ship. In fact, they could be posted with just a regular stamp for 32 cents. Plus, DVDs were much cheaper to buy and easier to store. So Reed felt the business model of renting out DVDs could work much better than VHS tapes. And since it was a brand new technology, nobody else was doing it yet. Admittedly, neither Marc nor Reed had ever actually seen a DVD before. Prior to 1997, DVDs were only available in Japan, but both of them had liked the idea of bringing movie rentals onto the internet, especially Reed, who just received yet another hefty late fine from Blockbuster. And so this new DVD technology seemed like it could be the answer. They were essentially betting big that DVDs would become more mainstream and the default standard instead of VHS tapes. And thus, the original idea for Netflix was born. The business model was fairly simple. Marc and Reed would buy a big collection of DVDs and create a website where people could rent them out for a small fee each. After a customer placed an order, they'd mail them the DVD of their choice in a protective sleeve, and it'd be at their doorstep in a couple of days. Once they'd watched it, the customer would simply put the DVD into a prepaid return envelope that was included with the order and send it back. So now they had their business idea, they needed some money to fund it. Luckily, Reed already had some of his own money to invest from a previous business venture, but Marc couldn't really afford to put much money in himself. So he instead turned to his mother, who became one of Netflix's earliest investors. Of course, she only invested because she wanted to support her son, yet that initial investment would go on to make her insanely wealthy. By the end of 1997, Marc and Reed had used their initial money to get a little office and hire a small team. Admittedly, it was all very low budget. They had just a few cheap folding tables, along with old secondhand furniture, and the employees they'd hired were working for well below average wages, but they promised them stock options, meaning those early employees would get a big payout if Netflix succeeded. Although initially, none of the team wanted the company to be called Netflix. The word Flix had a pretty negative, low-quality connotation. They all came up with other name ideas like Luna, Cinema Center, Now Showing, Scene 1, and Video Pix. But eventually, they all decided it would make sense to have a name that would combine one word related to the internet and one word related to movies. And since Netflix hit that criteria, plus it was short and kind of catchy, eventually they just went with that and the name stuck. The small Netflix team then spent the next few months building their website and buying multiple copies of literally every DVD they possibly could. Since the DVD format was still new, there were only around 800 titles available because a lot of movie studios hadn't been releasing their films on DVD yet. But Netflix tracked them all down, so they could legitimately claim to have every DVD that had been made. Of course, they pretty much just had to guess how many copies of each movie to buy based on what they thought might be popular. But finally, after months of work and planning and questioning whether this idea was totally insane or not, they were ready to launch Netflix to the world. It was time for the madness to begin. It was 8:56 a.m., and to say that the small Netflix team were nervous would be a ridiculous understatement. Marc could feel beads of sweat on his forehead as he checked the clock once again. At 9 a.m., they would make the Netflix website publicly accessible to the world. The team had been preparing for this moment for months. They'd even lined up a bunch of interviews with news outlets and reporters, so that as soon as they put the website live, they'd get lots of media attention to introduce people to their new service. However, the biggest reason for their anxiety was none of them had any idea how many orders to expect. It could be 0, it could be 10, it could be hundreds. At 9 a.m. on the dot, one of the engineers made a few clicks on his computer, and the Netflix site was officially live. They'd hooked up a bell to the computer so it would ring whenever they got a new sale. And so to get the ball rolling, Marc himself placed the first ever order on Netflix. He rented a copy of Casino and entered his details to get it shipped to his home address. The bell rang, and Netflix were in business. A minute later, the bell rang again, and again, and again. These were now real customers, strangers somewhere on the internet who were ordering DVDs for themselves. You see, in the weeks leading up to the website launch, the Netflix team had infiltrated online forums and bulletin boards for movie fans and started building up profiles on these sites as if they were normal users. Then, as soon as the Netflix website launched, they started making comments like, "Anyone try out that new DVD by Mail Company yet? Netflix? Looks like they have hundreds of DVDs. Prices are pretty good too." Obviously, they gave no indication they worked for Netflix, and so people on these forums just thought it was genuine comments, which helped drive some movie fans to the Netflix website right from day one. Marc was excited and went off to the other room in the office to do his scheduled interviews with the media to help drum up even more publicity for Netflix's launch. And for 15 glorious minutes, the orders continued to roll in. But then Marc noticed the bell had stopped ringing, meaning the orders had stopped coming in. And it soon became clear from the worried expressions from everyone else in the office, something had gone horribly wrong. Turns out they'd had too much traffic, and their website had crashed. Remember, this was long before the days of cloud hosting, where you could instantly just add more servers and bandwidth. Back in 1998, you had servers physically in your office to host your website, and Netflix hadn't bought enough of them. So someone had to run to the electronics store nearby to buy some more servers. They'd simply not expected demand to be this high on day one. Of course, it was a good problem to have, but it was also incredibly stressful. All that work over the last few months, preparing to launch, and now just 15 minutes in, and people couldn't even access their website. When one of their employees returned from the store with 8 new servers, they got the website back online. This time, the website lasted 45 minutes before it crashed yet again. Not just that, the Netflix team ran out of boxes to ship the DVDs, and they ran out of ink to print the shipping labels. Despite all the chaos, though, they finished the first day with 137 orders, which was far higher than anyone had expected. And they'd have almost certainly had even more orders if the site hadn't been crashing most of the day. So it was an incredibly promising start for the company. Of course, it was clear there was a huge amount of work ahead. There were several massive things they'd completely overlooked, like they hadn't set up automatic order confirmations, so the team was manually emailing everyone who placed an order. Plus, they hadn't even thought about how to handle international orders to other countries. And of course, the most urgent issue of all, simply trying to stop the site from crashing. The Netflix team knew they'd be working very late that night, so they ordered pizza, feeling optimistic about their new company. In Netflix's first full month after launching, their revenue passed $94,000. However, only $1,000 had actually come from renting DVDs. The rest was all from selling DVDs. You see, when Netflix first launched, they gave people both options. You could buy the DVD for around $25 or rent it for $4, and Marc and Reed had expected most people would rent. In fact, they hadn't just expected people to rent, they needed people to rent. The business model of renting out DVDs was much better because Netflix could rent out the same DVD over and over again, hundreds of times, and thus make far more money in the long run. But weirdly, hardly anyone was choosing to rent from Netflix. People were just buying the DVDs as a one-time transaction. Sure, it was great they were making lots of DVD sales, but it wasn't sustainable. As soon as other large companies started selling the exact same DVDs as Netflix, they would become a commodity and Netflix's profit margins would shrink. The only reason Netflix was selling so many DVDs in their first month was simply because nobody else had started selling DVDs on the internet yet. Marc and Reed knew for a fact that other companies would soon start doing it. Netflix needed people to start renting more DVDs instead, because then they'd have higher profit margins and a business model that was harder to replicate. A few weeks later, in the summer of 1998, Marc and Reed got a call from Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. He wanted to meet them. Bezos had started Amazon as an online bookstore, but now he was eyeing DVDs as one of the next products Amazon could sell. With Amazon flush with cash after going public, he was considering acquiring Netflix and integrating it into Amazon. In many ways, this was win-win. For Amazon, it would be much faster to get into the DVD market by buying Netflix instead of starting from scratch. For Marc and Reed, it meant a huge payout for just a few months of work, but they didn't want to sell. They felt there was huge potential with online DVD rentals. Instead, they struck a compromise. Netflix would redirect users who wanted to buy DVDs to Amazon, and Amazon would direct customers interested in renting DVDs to Netflix. This way, Netflix could focus solely on rentals, their long-term business model. To get more people renting, Marc struck a deal with some of the biggest DVD player manufacturers, like Sony and Toshiba. The plan, anyone buying a DVD player could enter the serial number on Netflix and receive free rentals. Sounds good, but in reality, it became a disaster. Sony pushed for 10 free rentals instead of 3, which cost Netflix dearly. Worse, the serial numbers were visible on the boxes, so people could claim free rentals without buying a DVD player. Legitimate customers also rarely converted to paying subscribers after redeeming their free DVDs. Netflix then tried a publicity stunt. Congress had released footage of Bill Clinton's grand jury testimony regarding the Monica Lewinsky affair, and Netflix converted it onto DVD, selling it for just 2 cents with the tagline, "Have your 2 cents on the Clinton testimony." The promotion initially attracted huge attention, but the DVD conversion company accidentally included adult films in some of the shipments. Netflix emailed apologies, but amusingly, nobody returned the mistaken DVDs. Despite all the chaos, Netflix was still hemorrhaging money. Promotions weren't producing recurring customers, and the Amazon partnership wasn't delivering results. Marc and Reed had tough questions. Should they have sold to Amazon? Should they have stuck with selling DVDs instead of rentals? Reed eventually confronted Marc about the company's struggles and presented a blunt assessment of leadership issues. He proposed becoming CEO himself, with Marc moving to president. Although Marc felt hurt, he knew Reed was right. Reed had more experience running a company and a better reputation in the tech industry, which would help attract investors. Then the dot-com crash hit. Funding for internet companies dried up, investor sentiment changed, and Netflix faced serious financial pressure. Despite the subscription model, Netflix was still a tiny company compared to Blockbuster. In 2000, Netflix's projected revenue was $5 million. Blockbuster made nearly $800 million in late fees alone, valued at $6 billion with 60,000 employees. Netflix's advantage was Blockbuster's slow reaction to the internet. Blockbuster had the mantra, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," sticking with physical stores and ignoring online trends. Netflix knew Blockbuster would eventually launch a DVD by mail service, but timing was crucial. Before the crash, investors were eager to fund internet companies, allowing Netflix to grow fast. After the crash, capital was scarce. Marc and Reed considered selling Netflix to Blockbuster as a lifeline, but the Blockbuster CEO dismissed online business models as unsustainable.
Blockbuster was actually given the opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million. Considering Netflix's market cap today, this was arguably the worst missed opportunity in history. But contrary to popular perception, Blockbuster wasn't at all oblivious to the threat Netflix posed. In fact, the company's own annual reports listed them as their chief rival. Instead, Blockbuster chose to compete with Netflix. And when we consider the fact that Blockbuster collected more than $800 million from just late fees alone in the same year that they were offered to buy Netflix, they had every reason to believe they could win.
With no buyout and tight funding, Netflix had to beat the multi-billion-dollar empire themselves. A third of Netflix employees were laid off to survive, but this unexpectedly increased efficiency. Only the most capable employees remained, and the company became leaner, more focused, and decisive. Their service was genuinely popular, giving Netflix a fighting chance. In 2002, Netflix launched its IPO, raising money to expand. They gradually attracted more subscribers and attention, and by 2004, Blockbuster finally launched a DVD by mail service, directly competing with Netflix. Marc Randolph, the original CEO, felt out of place in the growing company and stepped away to mentor other startups. Reed Hastings remained to lead Netflix through the battle against Blockbuster. Blockbuster, now aware of Netflix, poured resources into beating them. In one symbolic act, the Blockbuster CEO literally sent a kitchen sink to Netflix office, sending a clear message. They would throw everything at Netflix. Initially, Netflix tried multiple strategies, launching a social network called Netflix Friends, selling used DVDs, offering banner advertising, and even acquiring small film rights. Most of these initiatives failed to gain traction. Blockbuster, despite its size, diversified too much, experimenting with video games and other products. Netflix, by contrast, stayed focused on movies and TV shows, understanding that DVDs were not the long-term future. Internet speeds were improving, and in 2007, Netflix launched video-on-demand streaming, allowing subscribers to watch content online without shipping DVDs. Inspired by YouTube, this move was bold. No one had successfully streamed full-length movies and TV shows at scale before. Netflix's foresight positioned them as pioneers in digital entertainment, creating a foundation for their future dominance. Streaming transformed Netflix from a DVD rental company into a global entertainment powerhouse. The subscription model ensured recurring revenue, Cinematch kept customers engaged, and streaming eliminated logistical challenges of physical DVDs. Over time, Netflix invested in original content, producing award-winning shows and films, cementing their position as a content creator as well as a platform. Despite early mistakes, near bankruptcies, and competition from Goliath Blockbuster, Netflix's willingness to experiment, learn, and innovate allowed them to survive and thrive. Their story is a testament to persistence, strategic thinking, and bold innovation. The transition from VHS rentals to DVD subscriptions, and eventually to streaming, shows the power of adaptability and vision in shaping the future of entertainment.